Welcome everybody, it's 7:32 and to the first meeting of the year for the Darien TV Advisory Board. We have a special guest tonight. The first item on the agenda was, as we do every January, to elect officers, but we discovered we have not been reappointed yet, so we can't have an election to do officers, so we'll do that at the next meeting, which gives us more time to spend with
We'll have all that straightened out at the next board.
the first selectman meeting. So I'm just going to shut that door. We have the door open back there for you, but so we don't hear the basketball. Basketball gets to be louder than the meeting when the game starts. So if you want to go around, and why don't you introduce yourself? I know you know Al because you did the interview, but introduce yourself. And
Dennis Cummings.
Dennis, nice to see you.
Hi, Carrie Wysocki.
Hi, Carrie.
And in our slide presentation that you guys all got a copy of that Jim gave last night, it had everyone's background and every place where they had worked, so you get a sense of who's on the advisory committee. John wanted to talk to us to talk about goals for 2025 and where we think things are going and how do we try to get there before anybody else. And so with that as an introduction, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Well, thank you all for coming this evening and for inviting me to come along as well. I have a general initiative for 2025 across all of our, what I would call non-major boards and commissions, so not elected boards like planning and zoning and not Parks and Rec, that type of board. But really for most of our others, and especially the advisory boards for the Board of Selectmen, it all feels like it's in need of a refresh. And refresh in terms of membership, just to make sure everybody's excited, refresh in terms of mission and focus, refresh in terms of even just the charter for the committee. And I'm doing that because I think anybody who, any committee or board or commission that's appointed, and certainly anyone who's serving on any of those boards and commissions, really deserves an opportunity to contribute to the town. And to the extent that there's any board or commission that is not aligned with an agenda or doesn't have a mission or focus for the year, that makes it kind of unfulfilling for the people that have signed up, because it means that for all the talents and expertise that you have, and taking time out of an evening like this, you might feel that, well, I'm not as engaged or as contributory as I'd like to be. It's not to say that this board is not that way, but I've kind of gotten the sense that for all of our boards and commissions that it will be a useful exercise to just take a fresh look at all of that. So one of the things I've committed to in 2025 is that every board and commission is going to be coming before the Board of Selectmen. Usually it's just the leadership, and anybody's welcome to come to talk about their goals for the year, but also sort of as the year rolls along, to come in and talk about progress on all that and what you guys are doing. We'd like to make sure that in addition to the individual boards and commissions being refreshed, if you will, that there's also a refreshing of your linkage or liaison to the Board of Selectmen. Right? We're the main board in town that sets policy for the town, and a big way that we do that is through the agendas and focus of the various boards and commissions, all of which are appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And so we want to hear from you, and we want also to be heard so that we can come in and say, here's what we think, what do you guys think? But my objective is that over the course of this year, that you find new energy, that there's new focus, that there's something that each person on every board and commission can say, hey, that sounds great, that's how I'd like to contribute. That's the thing I'll work on behalf of my board or commission. So it's gonna be a lot of work, but I think by the end of this year, my objective is that if you're on one of these boards or commissions in Darien and you're volunteering, that you say by the end of this year that, you know what, that's fantastic. That's a good use of my time. I'm okay taking time out of my family or work or whatever to come in and make that contribution. This is fantastic. And so this is starting today for TV79 Advisory. As Mike said, both Mike and Jim presented to the Board of Selectmen last night and gave us kind of an overview, not just of the commission members, but some areas of focus. But one thing I noted during that meeting was that the sheer volume and output of programming of TV79 is, I mean, it's breathtaking. And a lot of it's due to Jim's not just his work every day to sort through all of this, but his creativity in saying, what could we do in terms of programming? There's the obvious stuff like taping meetings such as this, but it's ideas that he's had, such as the Ask the First Selectman videos, or some of the now AI summaries that they're starting to put out. I mean, I don't know of any other public broadcasting unit that's affiliated with a municipality in Connecticut, really, that has this type of output on a per capita basis, maybe even on an absolute basis. It's unbelievable. That said, there's lots of things to work on, lots of new things to consider, and things that you guys will want to focus on in the coming year. And my job is to help kind of bring that to life, help remove obstacles, help provide funding, help get others at the table that you might say, well, geez, we need someone with this talent or this background. I don't have a whole lot of power, but I've got a really big megaphone, and I can raise interest to get whatever help that you need. But you should be feeling pretty good about the mission of this group, and certainly the importance I ascribe to it from where I sit. But I appreciate you guys volunteering and being part of this. It's super important. The last thing that I'll mention is that one of the great things that Mike and Jim and others have led is what I think is the primary source of communication and transparency in this town. TV79 is it. This is the vehicle that makes meetings transparent, that brings to life town government, that helps people who are motivated to watch this stuff understand what we're doing at a municipal level. And in terms of a governmental function, I'm not sure anything's more important than that, right? The people need to hear what's going on. They need to understand. And Jim, particularly, Mike, others that have worked before them, they're the ones who bring this stuff to life every day, and it's unbelievably important. And so I'm going to make it a point to come to as many of your meetings as possible. I'd like to, Jim and I talk almost constantly, Mike as well, but I definitely, from my personal standpoint, I'm very motivated by what you guys do, and I'm here to help, but for real. So let me end my comments there. That's kind of my introduction, and we'll kind of go through this. I look forward to the discussion.
One of the things Jim talked about last night, and then we had in the conversation after, is we've expanded the format on from the linear. You had to be watching TV79, and we can only play 5 shows a week, and a linear, and gee, I hope I find something I like when I turn it on, to everything on demand with variable speeds and timestamps and closed captioning and formats where you can get it from your computer to your phone to your TV. And we talk about news deserts. And what I said last night is, in Darien, we're the oasis in the news desert. We just have to get more people to the water and to show them where the water is, to be informed about what's going on in Darien with the time that they have and giving it to them. We're going to be doing some prototypes of, here's what the Board of Selectmen said, the chairman's report and the liaison reports. And here's what, because Planning and Zoning and Board of Finance have the same thing, where the chair give a report, and then they have liaisons to the different committees that give a 5-minute summary, and then the Operations Planning Commission meeting once a month brings together the 5 different parts to say, here's what's going on. That is a terrific way to stay in touch with what's going on. So one of the things we're looking at is, what are different ways that we can do to better deliver the content in the format that the person wants to use. Second issue is, as Jim looks to say, how can I spend more time traveling? How do we come up with
sometime in these next 30 years?
Yeah, but how do we find a way to reduce the pressure on him in order to maintain the output that we have, but also give him more freedom to do the things that he wants to do. And then a question John asked is, and maybe we form a committee to look at what else is going on in local news that perhaps we can steal from. There are a lot of different projects going on. One that Andrew Hayward had of today in Arlington, where they had a they did a summary of a town meeting, and an editor reviews the AI summary, and they post it, and that's their news site that they sell ads on. What are ideas that others are doing around the country that we might be able to learn from to either better cover what we're covering or to better automate what we do so that there are just less steps involved in the process?
I would add to that, shocking statement Jim had last night was that in interviews for, this is our TM candidates, that of all the people interviewed, 9 or so I think were on your list, not one of them, not one was watching TV79. And it showed, because you would ask them questions about how town government works, and they had few answers or misconceived notions or just did not know. And these were people who were aspiring to be part of government in an elected role. And so I say that not to blame these individuals. Believe me, before I was in government, I was actually focused on family and normal things people do to make a living. And so I went to this sort of dark side, right? But it does beg the question, I think what Mike is getting at, which is there some other way to make a digestible summary that these people could look at to get the essence of what they need to know? The story I brought up last night was somebody asked me how I watched baseball. I said, well, I don't watch the entire game. I go on the news and I watch a 7-minute reel of all the terrific highlights of 12 games across the country, and that's how I've watched baseball. And so maybe there's a group of people who could benefit from something like that. Maybe there's something some other municipality or town or place in the country is doing that's trying to get the message conveyed in a particular way like that, that's more summarized, or is using AI in some creative way, something like that. But putting some thought into that, and even if the result is something where we need to put a budget against that to make some kind of investment in either technical expertise or equipment to bring that to life, that's absolutely something I would consider, just because, as I said, in a way, it's not just the transparency that's the most important thing. If by transparent you mean, yes, go through and look at these 43 hours worth of videos and you will have full transparency. That's not digestible transparency. And so maybe something that's digestible transparency could be something that you guys could aspire to. One other point on just help for Jim, that's pretty important. This is a one-man show in many, many respects, and trying to fill in a bench behind Jim to provide support and eventually take on the preponderance of that work is a non-trivial exercise. And I think having maybe a subgroup of you guys think about that and how we would put something like that in place, recognizing that because of the sheer volume of stuff that Jim does, it may not be practicable to replicate everything that he's doing. So it may be rethinking the mission and the types of programming that we do and how it's actually delivered to make it something that's more manageable to say, successors in his role. So that's something that I think over the next year or so, certainly to start to take pressure off Jim, for this board to have an active role in determining and coming up with some recommendations for the Board of Selectmen, because that's clearly something we're going to have to fund.
Fortunately, we have John as our videographer tonight, who's the longest tenured videographer for Darien.
15 years.
15 years.
Outstanding.
And he's seen from soup to nuts and trained dozens and dozens of videographers.
Yeah. Well, let me just chime in on a couple of those things, but I want to hear from the rest of you guys as well too. In terms of succession planning, I have no ambitions of dropping my headphones and walking away from this right now. I love doing this job. I hope I can keep doing it. My health is making it much more difficult for me to move around and clamber around underneath the desk and things like that. I have tapped Jack Whittier as a trainee to become potentially acting program director in my absence. And we're in the process of training him now to make sure he knows how to edit videos, how to run the Castus server programming there as well too. And he's going to take a little time to learn all that, but he's been with us for over a year now. He's shown a lot of ambition. He's a go-getter kid.
Grew up in town, he's from here.
Exactly. His father was on the Board of Education. He's now back on the RTM. We know him, and he doesn't have any ambitions of moving to California. And going to UCLA Film School. At least not that he's told me as well too. You know, unlike the NCC kids, the Norwalk Community College kids that we use as videographers, they're great, they're wonderful, they're very ambitious, but they're not hanging around here. They're gonna, you know, finish their 2 years and go someplace else. So I'm working on building a little bench strength with Jack to deal with if I should get hit by a truck, you know, somebody's got to, you know, pick up the reins, and I'm open to suggestion on how to make that more efficient as well too. I do think it's a great idea to see what other systems like TV79 may be doing, and Mike and I both serve on the Area 9 Cable Council, which is Lower Fairfield County. And at the risk of sounding boastful, we have the best government channel in Fairfield County. There's no other government station that's doing as much as we're doing. Most of them are running 2 meetings a week, maybe. You know, we'll do as many as 12 or 13 meetings a week. But I think there are other greener pastures, even outside of the state of Connecticut. Massachusetts, for example, has systems that are funded in the millions of dollars thanks to cable franchise funding as well too, not even touching town funds as well. So it might be nice to see what can be done with more money. Sorry, John, I don't want to, you know, whet the appetite of
The number you dialed has been disconnected.
but I would like to have, you know, some of you step up and say, yeah, let me help. It's probably just going to be an online research exercise, determining a few systems that are worth looking at in greater depth, maybe doing some phone interviews, watching their product, etc., looking at the various platforms, their websites, because we're looking to improve our website, see if there's a better model out there that we should be emulating as well too. So anybody want to volunteer to help do that? Don't all jump in at once.
I'll start.
Ah,
Yeah.
wonderful, great. Dennis, you got any time on your hands to help?
I was waiting for the AI questions to come up.
Oh, okay.
That's been my new passion as of late. And it's
Okay.
sort of an area.
Well, I'll work with Al on this idea. What are your thoughts on AI?
So last meeting, you guys heard my pretty aggressive skepticism on it, and now I welcome our computer overlords. You know, but I've seen a lot of good case uses for it. But I think part of my question is, you know, when we were talking about it, I don't know how much you guys know about how it works on the back end, but I've gotten better at understanding what tokens are and parameters are and different models and things like that. And I now feel more qualified to ask the questions that I could have asked at the last meeting in terms of, okay, if this is using generative AI for a 3-hour meeting, and the average AI can only take about 1,000 tokens, which is say words for lack of a better word. Well, how is it recording a 3-hour meeting if it's only remembering the first 1,000 tokens? Is it, you know, doing 5-minute chunks and then recapping? Well, then that recap doesn't really work, because what if it doesn't understand the broader context of the conversation or something like that? And those are all questions that I would love to talk to the provider of the service, because I'm sure they have wonderful answers as to how they do what they do and stuff like that. It also, I think, in a lot of ways scratches my itch for continuing to learn more about some of these services. The other thing that I thought was interesting bringing up, if we're talking about continuing to produce high quality content and making sure it's accessible, I really applaud you guys, because man, I take the minutes, or you know, I have. For me, I've been sort of sitting at the knee of some giants here, sort of watching what you guys have done. For me, it's, you know, watching my colleagues use YouTube to watch Board of Ed meetings, and you know, I think viewership is larger when you start to realize the different access points. But I've also noticed that every year we evolve, and I think that's a necessity. You know, I was looking, I asked AI about something that I wanted, which was perfect recall of all my conversations. And I said, well, we don't do that right now. We can recall your first 15-minute conversation, and then we can store a little bit in your permanent memory, maybe the sort of style, the way you like to be talked to, your long-term goals, something like that. It's like, well, I kind of want that personal assistant who remembers every single thing I've ever said. And so I said, well, when's that going to happen? And it gave me a 10-year stage of, well, it's going to do this first, and then it's going to do this, and then it's going to do this. And I think about the fact that our media dispersion might need to respond in the same way. Like, I wouldn't want to buy the MySpace product when Facebook wins, and I wouldn't want to make a major capital investment. One thing they talked about, for example, posting an AI summary that then is reviewed by a human, right, is kind of what we've talked about. But you have sort of the issue of like, well, how do you know the human actually sat for the 3-hour film, and watched it, right? And then the second thing is, well, there's going to be accrediting agencies, ethicists. So in the same way that you don't check your food because the FDA checks your food for you, one of the predictions that they said is, look, in the next 10 years, you're going to have accredited AIs and public boards that are viewing those AIs, telling you that the algorithms and parameters that they're using are fundamentally acceptable, right? So when I asked a question about for like tone, we had an AI summary that did a podcast, and it injected humor into things, which sounded great until you realized that it was editorializing the meeting. It was making an emotional judgment about the meeting, whereas I've always been a firm believer of, we are the boring channel. Our job is transparency. You make the judgment. Here's the video. Not to say that summaries and minutes aren't a good thing, but now we would have a licensure company that would assure you that the tones are up to the same media standards or whatever we're looking for. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind is if we're going to continue to evolve from TV to Vimeo to YouTube, I would recommend that that's the sort of way we behave with these emerging technologies is every year we're checking in and sort of seeing what's changed in them this year.
Well, I think
That was a very long statement, I'm sorry.
No, you raise an excellent point, because this is the very question that Mr. Zagrodzky asked of us in terms of the AI summaries that we're using. How accurate are they? And independent of each other, we both said about 95%.
I get to play the skeptic and questioner, by the way.
I know, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, the first time Mike came to us with the idea of doing AI, I think some of you weren't around in those
You can
days.
see the wounds.
Yeah, I was ruthless. I just said, it's not ready, I don't believe
That's a word
it.
I
It's
would have
like,
used.
no.
That was a good word.
However, I think the point you're making is a good one. Right now, we're really using whatever platform that Vimeo uses to crunch its AI, and I'm not sure which one it is. We'd have to do a little more research on that. I also find, to your point, because I didn't know about this whole tokens thing, but I also find that looking at the AI summary before I post it, it seems to cover the first part of the meeting really well, but there's things that happen later in the meeting that don't seem to get referenced. And now I perhaps understand why. So I would welcome working with you to take a look at the AI summaries that we're posting and see if they are, first of all, accurate, and second of all, comprehensive enough. Even the AI summary that we got of last night's Rules Committee meeting, which ran, an hour and 30 minutes or something like that, had a lot of the stuff at the beginning, but it didn't have any of the stuff that Jack Davis of the Board of Finance and Budget was talking about. And now I maybe understand, better why.
Well,
Can you explain tokens? I'm sorry.
So I got mad because I was using AI and it kept on forgetting things. And so I've now started to use it as a personal assistant. And it depends on the model, because keep in mind we're talking about different products here. But AI, think of it like a math problem in terms of what it's deciding to do. So the first thing it has is these things called parameters. And this is, the company has fed in all these rules about how to interpret a word or background knowledge. Then it has knowledge that it's given. So if you're thinking about your brain, you have certain rules of thumb. I like yellow more than blue. That's a parameter. right? And then you know who Napoleon was. So that's a fact you know, but that's not a parameter. That's not a feeling.
Judgment.
Right. So those are two factors. Then the third factor is someone asks you a question and they feed to you a sentence, right? Those are the tokens, right? And so you can hold a lot of tokens in your head because you're a human being. Because the servers are gathering tons and tons of information, and because of all the electrical usage, and I'm sure you guys have heard some of that stuff, basically, depending on how much you pay or don't pay, and how the technology is approved, 500 to maybe 10,000 tokens if you're on a paid basis is what an AI will feed. And what it'll do is it'll collectively start to forget at least the ones I've used have gone the opposite way, where they will collectively forget the tokens. So they'll continue to receive the new information from you, but something that you mentioned 20 minutes ago, it will no longer remember because it's forgotten that token, if that kind of makes sense. Which means that they're kind of like, if you've ever seen the movie Memento, the person has the inability to retain information past 20 minutes or so. So those are three really important factors. Two other factors are the parameters by which they respond. They have what I would call a temperature, so they can get really, really rote if you turn their temperature really down, but they lack, for example, humor, creativity, because they're not taking risks when they'll just jut out the most straightforward word. And ironically, that might actually be good for us, but it's bad for when I use it and I want it to be, tell me how to do something in an interesting way or something. And then on top of that, it also has a risk assessment of how far it wants to go in speculating. So there's sort of like, if this is a math problem, there's 5 different variables that you can tinker with too. You can turn temperature up, you can change those variables. You can use models that use different parameters than other parameters. So there might be a model that's better for newscasting because the parameters they use are much more on ethical, just the facts, ma'am, versus parameters that are more creative. Image generation programs use way different parameters than text generation, for example. And this is all things that I've learned in the last 30 days. There's a lot of great questions to be asked. And I think by the time I learn all this stuff, somebody's going to come out with a product that's introduced a whole new things too.
So the retention span, is that in the system? It's only 20 minutes? Is that what you're saying?
So if you're using ChatGPT, which is probably the most ubiquitous one, right? You can ask ChatGPT to remember about 500 words of long-term information. So for example, I like ChatGPT to talk to me with an encouraging term, and it knows that I like history
Are
and
you paying the
adventure.
$20 a month, or you
No,
got?
this is on free. This is
This is a free one?
This is the free one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is actually one of the things I'm trying to teach some of the students to work with is how to use this appropriately as opposed to just Wikipedia too.
Right.
But as an interlocutor, right? Something that helps you, right?
So my point really is that it doesn't, so if it covers a meeting, for example, Great Island or something like that, and it's now the 5th Great Island meeting, it doesn't bring a reporter's skill,
No, not at all.
which is it remembers the issues, and then if there's a new issue raised, it understands that as a new issue. That doesn't happen.
Now you could do some interesting things. You could take the 4 AI-generated summaries and you could shove it in and say, look at these 4 summaries, tell me what has happened over the course of the year in this issue. But it just gets further and further reductive as it sort of goes. And a single human would have to do that. They would have to, talking about generating content, you could have, not just reports, but you could have meta reports in that fashion. But there's somebody in there, content creating, making AI do that, telling them to do that.
A couple of things come to mind. What the Vimeo AI and when I use ChatGPT, we have a paid account.
Mm-hmm.
When I use it, it's basically just taking a meeting, turning the audio into a transcript, and summarizing the gist of the transcript.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's Google's Notebook.ln that does the podcast thing that we were playing around with. I believe you can actually give it websites or PDFs or say, using this knowledge base,
Yeah.
look at this new meeting.
Mhm.
But I don't wanna, if I was running the Darien Times, I'd be looking for the latest meeting of the Great Island Advisory Committee in context with all the ones that have happened so far. But for our purposes, what we're really just trying to do, I think, is to capture the essence of what happened in this one meeting. It may not remember that something else happened in an earlier meeting. But I would, you and I are gonna be an AI subcommittee of 2, okay? Because I think this is a crucial item to deal with. And the fact that you suggest, a little research might turn this up, what are the models that newscasting systems are using? Are there better models that are better for journalism as opposed to advertising, persuasive marketing, et cetera, et cetera? Just the facts. I mean, the nice thing about, we did these experimental podcasts, remember Google Notebook came up with these experimental podcasts? And yeah, they injected a little humor into it, to your point of last night, which was to make it more listenable. Because it's a podcast. It's not supposed to be a rote remembering of everything that got said in the meeting. Which, yeah, it makes great for a podcast, it makes it more listenable, but you're right, that's a subjective decision.
But I'd be much more comfortable if I knew it was certified by journalistic standards, right? As long as the candy bar is healthy, I don't care what the outside wrapper looks like to sort of make it appetizable, right?
I want one of those healthy candy bars.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the problems is we are the tip of the spear here too, right? Like in 5 years, there will be ethicist models that say this AI is approved for this, and here's the 5-member public board of directors that ensures that the algorithm is tuned and it's Walter Cronkite Jr. and et cetera. So I think that's the other reason why I'm sort of hesitant to really jump into any long-term plan, is because I have a feeling we're going to be jumping on a boat that isn't built yet. Like that's probably what's going to happen 5 years from now. Is we'll select a piece of
summary by the time it floats.
Right.
It doesn't float. Yeah.
For now, I think it's about experimentation. It's about figuring out our needs so that we can report those to whoever's going to try to sell us those needs.
Well, we've had minimal feedback on our AI efforts. I mean, I haven't had people going, I love it, it's so great, it really helps me understand which meetings to watch.
But it's not
But
really
nobody's criticized it
It's really
either.
not readable in the format that we give it to them.
The
It's
way
in
it
the
is
side
now,
window, and if you're on your phone.
I think people are
it's a
scanning it to
difficult-
find what part of the
Yeah, it's
meeting
a
they need to
difficult-
go to,
it's
and
a
then they're
difficult
going.
thing.
Yeah.
Google announced yesterday at the Consumer Electronics Show that by the end of 2025, they will be rolling out a personal newscast product where AI you will feed in what your interests are, and they will deliver you a personal newscast on a schedule of your liking. And if you want to be in different silos, it'll bring news from that silos. If you don't want to be in, if you want a broad list of sources, then they will incorporate that, but that they will deliver you your newscast every day at 6 o'clock or whenever you want it, to say, here's the things I'm interested in, bring me up to date. And they're going to be introduced.
Audio, video, text?
Everything. And what they showed was somebody at CES said it was pretty bare bones, but they've announced that by the end of 2025 will be universally distributed.
Matt, what if you had, say, an avatar for the TikTok aficionados or young people today, an avatar that comes in and says, tell you what, I will read to you a combined summary of meetings in the 3 areas that are of interest to you, and that'll be provided every Friday at 5 o'clock. Right, so I got 20 minutes of this avatar talking to me, and it says, well, Great Island did this, and the Sewer Commission did this, and Parks and Rec did this, done. I mean, it sounds like that's around the corner.
Yeah, that's the prototype of work, yeah, that's the
But
prototype
that
of
might
work.
actually be more interesting than a text summary, right? Because people are going to TV79 to watch something, and then to say, well, we have this AI summary, but you're going to have to actually read the summary and not watch it. We're not signing up to read things.
The avatar's good. It'll be fun working on prototypes, yes. But he's right, I set the parameters at 5,000 characters when to do a meeting summary or the DMA speaker meetings, give me a summary in 5,000. We did the first minutes for the rules committee last night, and said, make it in minutes, and it formatted it, every resolution, who made the motion, who seconded it, what was the vote, so it had a place where the clerk could just put in, they didn't have the names of who made the motion, but it was left in the position, so you just had to fill in who made the motion, who seconded it, and it was remarkably accurate.
Is that ChatGPT?
It was ChatGPT again.
Yeah, but I look at some of the technology, I've been looking into AI tutors for foreign languages, and some of this is, I have to say, is pretty good.
Really?
I mean, you can have a conversation and they will reply and answer questions, drawing on the vocabulary that is built into that system, all in native quality conversation. And I look at something like that and I think about that technology being applied to this, where you're just asking for a summary, and the body of work they're summarizing is a transcript of these meetings. It strikes me we're not far from this, or being able to produce something like that.
Oh, Darien Times is gonna love this.
Well, I think that
Put them out of business.
the thing too, though, is to put good brakes on asking good questions as this goes, right? Because I think the technology will outpace the question of, okay, we can get a summary right now, but one of the questions that I want to throw out, right? ChatGPT has content standards, right? So if you ask it a question that's coercive or violent or something like that, it will either work around it or it won't address it, right? We're a public utility. We have very diplomatic, old New England meetings. But who's to say that someone won't get up in a meeting and say something truly untoward, right? And that's a matter of public record. That's an important part. This is the historian in me kind of kicking in, right? And if the ChatGPT summary sort of is like, there was a light disturbance, or something like that, or simply omits it because it violates the content standards. I remember when we did the generative AI for our discussion about AI, it didn't mention our discussion of AI, which that was more the conspiracy theorist in me than anything, but so there's questions of, I need to know that it's got a billion parameters. I can't know every parameter that it has, but I need to understand, or at least have some feedback from the companies understanding how it selectively edits and ensuring journalistic quality, ensuring, those sorts of things. And I think that's one thing, the more I do this stuff, the more I just want to pick up the phone and be like, I need to talk to someone in ChatGPT,
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah, good luck.
But I think we're a public service, and it's incumbent upon us to say, well, if we can't answer those questions, then I don't know how confident I am using a product until we can answer the questions that trouble us. I mean, that's, I think, maybe the one fly in the ointment about sort of jumping forward with these things, or, at the very least you've been putting generated by AI, which is sort of the token of, hey, be careful. But what I'm starting to realize is, in a world of easy access, hey, be careful might not be enough,
One of the things we're lucky is we own the copyright on everything, where a lot of ChatGPT, the New York Times is suing, the Wall Street Journal has accepted to deal with ChatGPT, so they're getting paid for the use of their content. The New York Times is suing them because they don't want them to scrape any of their content. But for the work that we're asking them to do, they don't need to know what the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal said. It's all of our content. Now, bring up the point of someone in a public meeting saying something untoward, how does that get addressed? That's an interesting question.
What are you gonna say, John?
Yeah, I was going to say, somebody once told me government works when it's local, and now having had this job, I believe that. I think we can afford to take some risks there, because the meetings that we're talking about are sort of discrete and digestible on their own. Yeah, it's 3 hours, but I can get through a Board of Education meeting on 1.5 playback speed, and it's okay. And all the people who are in that meeting, and anybody who has an interest in this, they're all listening and watching this, and so I think that's almost a built-in community notes, if you will, that it's going to provide an integrity backbone on some of this stuff, that because it's local and it's all our stuff, at some level will obviate the eventual need for the standard checking that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we're gonna want to get to that, but I wouldn't let that sort of hold back experimenting with some of this stuff.
I agree, and maybe the better way to put it is, what is our role in that experimentation? For instance, if you can tell ChatGPT to speak to you in a positive manner when it reports, should we be looking at what are the permanent things we want to put in our instructions for minutes, right? So when it produces minutes, right now it just produces a default, but we can build a TV79 profile on ChatGPT and give it some basic heuristics to say, avoid speculation of the future, or consider labeling the opening speaker and respondent more clearly, right? It can also be quality of life stuff more than emotional stuff too.
This board could actually start to play a role like that.
Right.
I mean, part of the reason we would have an advisory board consisting of people with particular backgrounds or professional qualifications would be that we would start to trust you guys to go through a process to establish those standards and try to enforce them, so that the product that we're reading that has that stamp of approval at a local level. I think that could be good.
Well, that may be useful in other communication endeavors of the town, the annual report that the town puts together. Used to
There you
be
go.
printed, hard copy. But if you're gonna be able to involve AI in processing information, looking at minutes, TV79 content, et cetera, that might be a useful task. I mean, the deck that Mike put together yesterday for yesterday's presentation to the Board of Selectmen, our mission statement, and we never really have had a mission statement along the lines, but I thought he captured it well, which was, it's all about transparency, and I think going beyond the fact that we put pictures on people's television screens as television, to experiment with something like that, I think that would fit in with our mission, and it would be, I think, immensely useful to other aspects of the town. I don't know any other town boards, commissions, or otherwise that are dabbling with AI.
None to my knowledge, and just listening to you talk, fascinating that your education's come up in the last month. But even just hearing this is causing me to think about a much broader set of applications of all this, right? It's one thing to record all these meetings. It's kind of like, why do companies sell certain things? It's not for the product on the products, or the profit on the products. It's because of all these people buying those products and revealing their habits and their locations and their incomes and all that, and selling that database. So I'm not saying that you guys would do that, but your core product, which is recording all these meetings, may in fact just be a tiny bit of the value capture that you're going to do. It's the power of all this technology to disseminate that information with digestible transparency. We've got all these different things, and maybe even applications that we haven't thought of yet. And so just having this board staying actively involved in that type of creativity, but also connected to the outside world, such that you stay apprised of the things that are going on, because all the stuff that you just talked about in 6 months is obsolete.
Yeah.
Right? That thinking is totally obsolete in just 6 months. And so staying ahead of that for the benefit of the town in a way that we could use it and help our constituents stay informed would be fantastic. I'm all for it.
Carrie, maybe you can help me on the prototype project of, now we've got Board of Education giving us their timestamp minutes, so it's in an 8-hour meeting, you can find where they were talking about this area. But we'll talk about some things that we can perfect and circle around with us, and when we think they're ready, forward them on to you to take a look at.
What do you think about this conversation?
Well, to be honest, I mean, look, I think everything TV79 does is fantastic. I've been in the business for over 40 years, and when I first learned of this TV station, I was blown away. It's amazing. We all know that. We all agree on that. I think the goal of this year for me is I'd really like to increase awareness of it. Because we're talking about all these fantastic new innovations, and we certainly do keep up technically with everything. And, from programming to the latest, AI. But if you're not reaching the people who just moved here, or even the people that have lived here for a while, then we're not pushing the ball forward. So I would love to get more involved in some kind of marketing or some kind of promotion or self-promotion or.
I think that's a very valid point. For all the discussion of these nifty technological solutions, it gets back to one of my central questions I always ask, which is what problem are we trying to solve, right? So instead of jumping to solutions, sometimes what we're hinting at is that it would be better to take a step back and say, what problem are we trying to solve? And that is uptake, right? How many people are watching this? And it's exactly the statement Jim started off with, which is how do we get more people to pay attention to this stuff? And obviously we record all the meetings, but around the edges with technology or other techniques, is there some other way that we could get this stuff in front of people in a way that they'll say, that's content that I will digest
Right,
and consume?
and I think the people that already know TV79 exists will probably continue to follow along, but I think there's a big group that don't even know it exists. I mean,
A lot of them know, but
They
a
don't
lot
know,
of them
but
are not
it's
taking full
for them.
advantage of it. I mean, even where I sit, I have a lot of visibility into a lot of things, and there's a ton of stuff that I can watch. It is absolutely overwhelming, right? There will be weeks that go by that I'll miss stuff simply because I just fall asleep. There's just not enough time today. And selfishly, having something that's a little bit more digestible
sure.
that would allow me to keep better track of some of those things, I can only do so much. It would help me.
Well,
It would
in,
help.
in broadcasting, we used to do something called the best of. So at the end of the week, we would take the best of from multiple shows and make an hour of of what you missed and what we thought the best of was.
So the entire board of selectmen would be at best of, no editing required, it's all been best of.
Well, that's the first 10 minutes, and then,
One of the things back in the beginning, when we first went on Facebook, Jim and I played around and we spent $25 here and $25 there promoting our meetings to build awareness. And, maybe we go back and revisit now. Facebook has a different place in society now than it had 5 years ago, but there's still a lot of people who use it, but we've never, it's probably been 5 years, but we did move the needle when we spent $25 to $50
of our own money.
of our own money to promote, just to see how many more people followed us on
Did it work?
Facebook. There was
Look.
there was a marginal difference, but then we get into the ethical of, is it proper that we should be spending the money to, because there's an advertising model. So they only focus, so here it says it's advertising Darien TV79.
Well, even if they didn't watch the particular meeting that we were promoting, I think it helps raise brand awareness.
Yes.
We mentioned this at the meeting last night of the Board of Selectmen. Mike in his district, I in my district for the RTM, Lois in her district, all doing the candidates who were petitioning to get on the RTM after the election to fill vacancies. We all asked them, I always ask the same question, to candidates that are coming in. How do you know what's going on in town, okay? And they don't know who I am, aside from another member of the RTM. And they'll go, oh, I read the Darien Times, or I read the Patch. Of the 9 candidates between Mike and myself, not one of them mentioned TV79. And these are people that wanted to be on the RTM, okay? One of them mentioned, watch Channel 66, or whatever it was. So, Carrie has helped with marketing efforts. Carrie is the one that put together a nice one-pager that sits up in the lobby of the entrance to the town hall, right underneath our TV monitor, that says TV79. You go, oh, that's what that is, pick that up and go home. She's also helping me, look at the biannual survey that we have done of viewers. But absolutely, one of the goals that I put before the Board of Selectmen last night is we've got to do something to increase awareness of our existence. If people don't want to watch the Board of Selectmen meeting, that's fine. If they want to look at the Blight Review Board instead, or Board of Education, that's fine. But we're a resource. They need to know that we're there. And we've talked about everything from, there used to be welcome wagon when people moved to town. Maybe we need to work with the realtors in town who are introducing people to the Darien community. Here's the Darien Y, here's the library.
Right.
Oh, and the town has a great TV station as well, too. I've got pretty increased better cooperation from the Patch the Daily Voice in terms of them, they did last night, the Patch wrote a story on John's mentioning taking electronic payments for town services. And they put a link at the bottom saying, watch the entire meeting video here on Darien TV 79. So that's nice. We'll see if that moves the needle on that particular thing, but, you know, I think we just need to, that's why I invested in these attractive magnets to go in your car. Dennis, you can put one of these on your car. You got one already, Carrie, right?
Yeah.
Is it on your car?
It doesn't stick on my.
It doesn't stick on your car. Well, you got a plastic car then.
Is it shameful to ask that, do we need a rebrand? I mean, how many people are watching via TV? I mean, is it better that we say
It's an interesting question.
Darien Media Access, or, you know, Inside Darien?
Darien 79.
Aside from the fact that, you know, this has been our brand since we started.
Yep.
I'm a little kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
attached to that, but yeah, if, you know, I'm open to consideration of that as well too.
You know, I'm just wondering, and I think we talked about this, you know, there's probably some high-profile people that live in this town. Could we shoot a quick PSA with them that we can air somewhere that, you know, they shout out to TV79? Could we approach different places that have TV monitors and there's nothing in them to just keep it on TV79? I mean, I don't know, gas stations or wherever people have monitors.
Instead of News 12.
Yes. Like, I just think we.
We can go around from gyms and things like that and just change
Gyms,
the
yeah.
When I worked at CBS, I used to do that all the time.
Yeah, right. I mean, just to think outside the box, how we can get some promotion for ourselves that doesn't cost a lot of money.
We do some social media, not a lot. I mean, I do Twitter, I do Instagram, and it's basically, you know, announcing that we're doing a particular, we're gonna be covering such a meeting, such and such an important meeting tonight live, but we don't get a lot of traction even on Twitter, you know. Facebook, yeah, I mean, we stream to Facebook, we have a page on Facebook where you can see our videos as well too. But yeah, I'm open to suggestions on how to reach a
But
different
if you go to
audience.
Twitter right now, you have a banner that runs continuously while you're on X or Twitter, whatever you call it, that says TV79 is broadcasting live. And
Yes,
it's in pink at the top
right.
of your scroll, so you're always, and you can always click on it to go directly to the live feed.
That assumes you decided to follow TV79
Right.
in the first place and be reminded, but
Yeah,
yeah.
the only thing I would say about that is, it's funny, being in town government, and now that I do this full-time, I live and breathe town government all day long, 7 days a week. And so it's easy sometimes when you're doing that to forget that there's a lot of other things going on in Darien, Connecticut that got nothing to do with town government. But I think of it in that term because that's what I do all day. The same is true for people who are not involved in town government, and that there may be a lot of people who are aware of TV79, but town government is just not something that interests them. And so I think there's a theoretical limit, if you will, in terms of just how far you can penetrate with this particular subject matter, right? And with that subject matter, the only way you're actually going to increase penetration is through tactics like we've been talking about, which is more digestible summaries or things that are best of. You are picking out the stuff that's really interesting. Or if you really push it, to start to put in controversial editorializing around comments, and you guys start to have a point of view on sorts of things. I promise you'll get a lot more viewership, but the question is how far do you want to go in to this world of trying to drag people in and not stray so much from what is ultimately your mission, which is a vehicle to provide recordings of town government for purposes of transparency and education. Right, that's a tricky line across. It kind of gets into some of the stuff that you're talking about, which is anything that's not a recording of a meeting is you're editorializing, or you're cutting out something to present to someone in a more digestible way, and inevitably there's going to be judgment associated with that.
Well, and I think you're right that there is a place for that promotion in sense of, I'm now getting the token wire of like what's going on at my kid's elementary school, right? And I wouldn't say, what right or left-wing hack is writing this? It's a celebration of what's going on, and it's about as much as I want to digest, right? And I do think that's where, I think it was, at one point in time you floated, what if our website did have, update on Board of Ed budget process, right? Because we know that's a big thing, right? Update on, state of the town, right? Sort of those nice, quick pieces that are, positive, affirmational summaries of what happened in those meetings. I think anything beyond that then starts to become maybe a question of, and I think that there's the tragedy that we've discussed quite a lot, or I think Jim and Mike, you guys have been on the forefront of, is that the local media has really retreated. So, we feel more and more sad that our job of presenting straight up the meetings was supposed to be in tandem with a group, a for-profit group, that fundamentally did the thinking and the editorial, right? And there's just less of that, and then it, kind of calls us, is like, well, do we fill that vacuum? And
See, this gets to my point about limits, when he said that here's an informed person who knows that where he could get a ton of information about Tokyo Elementary School, but he is self-limited to this tidbit and no more than this, even though I know I could get a lot more stuff. I'm not going to watch it or pay attention to that, because that's as far personally as I need to go. Now I'm going to actually spend time with my actual child as opposed to...
And if I need to, I can click on the link and go into the thing,
on an as-needed basis, right? And
So if they suddenly find asbestos in the air at Tokenique School,
clicking that hyperlink,
you're gonna be going there because you think they're the best, probably the most connected to whatever is the details of it.
Why? Because if it bleeds, it leads, right? And so highlighting a story like that is going to get eyeballs and attention. So again, it gets back to, do we have just sort of a single video every week of bleeding stuff, people yelling at meetings, crazy stuff that goes on? I can provide a whole list of crazy things that went on just today that I'm sure would be viewer worthy. But do we want that?
Well, Jim and I were talking about last night about developing these prototypes, and it's one thing to say, okay, here's the chairman's report and the liaison reports, those are straightforward. But then making editorials to say, okay, what in the planning and zoning committee meeting, so do we do a summary of Thorndale? It then gets into someone making an editorial decision about what to spotlight that happened in town that's not a regurgitation of fact from a liaison report. And that will, once we get to that point, it'll be an interesting discussion of how do you select beyond just the clear black and white.
Part of the problem you have is it gets back to some of the videos that I've done, and even your Ask the First Selectman videos. What's interesting about those, as we were talking, was they have high viewership. Not because I'm fetchingly handsome, which of course I am, but it's because they're short and they cover discrete topics as opposed to a long agenda and lots of people talking. It's one person on one topic saying X. And after 5 or 7 minutes, there's clarity, whether it's pickleball or evaluations or any other things I've talked about. And on the one hand, short and topic specific, I think is helpful for people who've got limited time, particularly people who want to just focus in on asbestos at a school. I'm going to click on that, and I don't want to hear about anything else, versus coming up with meetings, which are
Messy and
well,
long.
they're messy, but
boring.
the good news is that all information that was expressed publicly on that topic in this meeting is available, not every last bit of it.
Okay, so Al, you're going to work on taking a look at what's going on. And I'll give you some sources to
Some other systems,
look
yeah.
at. Jim and Dennis, you're going to work on the AI. And then Carrie, you and I can talk about marketing and developing some prototypes of the best of or digitized summaries to see how long it takes and how long the summaries are, and then do some testing to find out, do people like them or not?
Al, do you have any reaction to some of the conversation you've been having?
Well, I love the brain power in this room, by the way. It's really great, very impressive. I know nothing about AI except what I learned in this meeting. And so, I just don't trust it, and I worry about it. I worry about editorializing. I think when I was being interviewed by the Board of Selectmen, that was my concern, and I think we share it, is that we probably should be more boring than sexy, because we're the C-SPAN of this city. And,
Yeah.
the more we stray from that, I mean, as we were talking about, well, maybe we could do a newscast, or maybe we can do that, or maybe we can have, point counterpoints and things like that, but it gets away from what you just said, which is, this is the public record, it's here, and that is the transparency I think we have to do. The more we move away from that, the more we approach editorializing that eliminates things that people find important or that they care about or side with.
Or it compromises the objective reputation of TV79 as a
Yes,
go-to
right.
C-SPAN type entity that's not partisan.
That's right. It's interesting, I think, I'm a fan of Turner Classic Movies, and I was thinking, that's probably the last example of what cable television was supposed to be. Which you could go, there are no commercials, you go somewhere, and you can see every movie that was ever made, or they get their hands on. And then everything else is shouting at each other. And we certainly don't want to become that.
Yeah, I've wondered though about, again, in a small community where you could appropriately deviate from a pure C-SPAN approach and introduce just a little bit of that, even on an experimental basis, just to test the waters. I mean, if I think about news, I'm thinking about the old McNeil-Lehrer reports, right,
Mhm.
where you would have long form, well, not long, Joe Rogan long, but sort of 15 or 20-minute segments where you'd bring in both sides of an argument, and you'd have those two journalists who, throughout their careers, I mean, you never could doubt their ability to play a nonpartisan journalistic role between two people with adversarial points of views. They're fabulous. I still think that they were the best that I've seen, their ability to do that and to have that reputation on both parties. But to have something like that where you could do that. The issue here, ultimately, where I see divides, it's 99 times out of 100, it's just not partisan. It's on particular issues. Trees on 23A going to Great Island. What are we doing about Weed Beach? I'm upset about now IDEA being cut from the Board of Ed budget, that type of thing. So you could get a debate that's not partisan where you could come in and say, this is why it's being done. Here's some people who don't like that. I don't know if you want to get into something like that. That drives eyeballs for sure. And that's a lot more work than simply taping meetings or summarizing and trying to clean them up a bit. But ultimately, it's a question of how far do you want to go with something like that, and what problem are we trying to solve?
Well, this has been very productive, I think, very useful.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and
Marching orders.
yeah, we got a list of, so we'll get together in April, be able to update where each of these different projects are. And it'll be iterative along the way, but we'll see what kind of progress we can make in the next 3 months as we delve into some of these other issues.
Well, and as we look at other organizations,
Right.
see how they've approached that issue
Mhm.
of going beyond just doing the C-SPAN approach.
Yeah, copying and plagiarizing is bad in school. It's fabulous at all other times.
Okay.
So if there is something we could copy from somebody else that's doing a good job, absolutely.
Best practices.
That's it. That's
right.
right.
If I could ask if somebody could make sure that the April meeting gets on my calendar, because I don't want to miss that, because we're just being here to hear what you guys have to talk about. And, Jim and Mike, we talk all the time, but any of you would like to have a conversation, or you want to, my door's open. I would be happy to talk to any of you about any of this stuff as your work progresses. I think it's pretty important. On the 3 topics we kind of talked about up front, but these separate assignments, I think, are also super interesting and could be very valuable for the town.
And you can be part of our focus group. You were on artificial intelligence. You got some of the first examples of
Yeah.
our artificial intelligence summary, so you could see what it would
I
look like
like
for
what
meetings
I
that you had
see.
attended.
Yeah.
It's not 100%, but it's
Better.
better. And the number of applications is just, it's mind-boggling.
That's the part that really changed my complete opinion on it is, and since we have the first selectman in the room, the thing I'm telling everyone that I'm now coming in contact with is, I think it's going to be equivalent to the internet in terms of its change, paradigm change, and people are going to use it. So the question is, are your employees or government officials using it without you knowing? Or do we have policies and targets and thoughts about it? I mean, I think it's really important to be forward thinking about it. And I am a technology skeptic, and I'm starting to realize,
You need skeptics.
I mean, just so you know how I've used it, it's been in speech writing, right? So you can come in and say, I am going to be speaking at a July 4th thing. I need something that's 300 words long. I need a little bit of history. I need to be uplifting, and it's for a mayor in a small town. And it'll come up with a quick speech. I actually don't read what was there, but it would remind me of some history or some other things that I'd forgotten about that, oh, okay, that's interesting. I can go bring that up, and that's useful.
I use it to write my weekly column for CT Mirror on transportation. Not to write the column, but to answer questions. And it's just fabulous for that. I don't cut and paste anything that it's answered, but I use the footnotes that it's given me to go to the source material that it used to come up with that summary. So if I say, how is ridership on Metro North in January of 2025 compared to pre-pandemic, it has the numbers right there, and it sources them as coming from MTA.
I think the new thing that you're going to want to think about is most people are talking about generating a product, using it for problem solving, using it for I need a plan for how to do this. The plan has evolved from this day to that day, and it's now no longer working. I need you to adjust, and this person has just been hired. I mean, as in the word I keep on using is interlocutor, right? That it is a personal assistant in a way more than just write me a speech. And I think that's the thing that's scaring me, but also making me really excited. Is
One of the problems I have is simply air traffic control in my brain. There's an interesting thing about this job is that there's some technically challenging things, but most of it is just sheer volume of things that you have to remember, and people you have to remember, and people asking you things. I mean, every day it's overwhelming sometimes. But having an AI assistant where I said, okay, I got to remember this, remember that, this worked, and just feed that in there, and that person or the AI assistant remembers all that and can say, oh yes, this is how we handled it back then. Like that, I mean.
Asking it questions like, what have I not thought of too? I mean, some of the questions you can ask it, because that's the other thing, is training people on how to use it appropriately I mean, as a teacher, that's becoming my thing, but here's this. What are some questions that I'm not thinking about when I've been delivered this information, right? Knowing what you know about me and the questions I've asked in the past, what are 3 things that I can do next with this piece of information? I mean, in terms of having it as a coach, I mean, there's the use case for improving. You have a goal, and then improving your goal through it is stunning.
Are they teaching any of this at Darien High School?
I'm gonna do PD on it to my department in
By
a
PD,
couple months.
You're gonna do what? What is PD?
Professional development.
Okay.
But I think a person was brought, they delivered a speech, and then they left. I don't think a lot of new emerging technologies is, okay, who knows the most about this in this room, let's get that person to do it. Because that's the best you're gonna get on a low budget basis, right? And I think that's how it's gonna lay itself out in pretty much everywhere, right? And
Well, your example in this room.
yeah, which I'm fine
Low
with.
budget too.
Right, as long as you recognize that the first thing I said is I'm 30 days into this, but that's where I want to, as a teacher, we're looking at cheating is going to go up because students can generate their own papers, and it's like, that is the tip of the iceberg of what this thing is going to do. You're going to have personalized tutoring services for kids. I mean, you're going to have, life coaches for people, right? In terms of me meeting my goal of losing weight or something. I mean, and it's not just, oh, here's what you should diet. It's knowing you, here's exactly the words I need to tell you to make you feel to make a better choice. And that's the kind of stuff that you're going to want your staff to get used to, is not just how to interact with AI, right? A la how to get on the internet, but no. that's case use number one. Let's talk about case use, not, for municipal water, what are the top 10 issues of municipal water? And in every one of those issues, let's ask the question, can AI help us with this? Sort of roof to studs kind
But
of.
you're just listening to you talk brings up an interesting point, which is, even though I think this has the prospect of revolutionizing a lot of things, just listening to you talk and convey the knowledge you have of this now. Every bit of it was, I took an initiative, I went and I played with it. I tested and showed that it does this great, but it has these limitations, and I don't like this, but I think this will change if I ever do that. All of that came from a proactive and disciplined approach. This is, I'm motivated to go figure this out, and you spent the time to actually get there. And so it doesn't forgive the individual from the need to be disciplined and focused to go out and do something
Yeah.
and to get familiar with it, because the more skilled you are at knowing what questions to ask, right? Because it's partly what didn't I think of, but it's also knowing when specifically to pose that question or what parameters to give that question to get the most out of AI. So I don't care what these kids do, if they're just watching a YouTube video describe that stuff, there's a big difference between the person who read the book and the person who wrote the book.
Yep.
And that truism still applies even with AI.
Well, and I think that's the thing that, like, one of the things that I would convey about this too is I see a dichotomy in students in how they use it.
I'm sorry, what do you teach or?
History.
History.
But, there are students who haven't read the book, right, who say, summarize this. And then there's a kid who looks at it and goes, I'll summarize it, like, I want to understand it, right? And they're starting to figure out that the right way to use this is say, I love adventure stories. Teach me this historical event through adventure stories, right? Give me a 5-question quiz do I really know what I'm reading, right? And I think in the same way that you needed to teach people how not to fall for phishing scams, when email started showing up, right? Like, that's, I think, this sort of same degree of forward thinking is, you can create a subcommittee in every town department that says, hey, I need 2 people who are starting to think about AI early, right? How can this be a big problem for us? What are the stupid AI things that people are going to do and get us sued, right? And what are the AI case uses that we haven't thought of? Can I get 2 people in this department to be that person, to be those people? That sort of theory crafting, I think, is, and for here, it's us.
When they talk about the job market, I heard you told the story about the bear, where the 2 guys see the bear and one guy stops and says, what are you doing? I'm putting on sneakers, aren't you worried about the bear? He said, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. It's, whether AI is gonna cost someone their job, it's who knows AI better is the one who's gonna be employed.
Yeah.
The one who learns about it and learns how to replicate it.
That's true with every new technology.
Yeah. So, anything else for the good of the order? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second? We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Thanks, John.
For having me.